Hey everyone, it's been a while. Last time we'd spoken, I was in a place where things were going really, really well. But then in April, I began to sense that something was horribly wrong with my arm, and it crushed me. Up until that moment, my recovery was like my number one priority. I was hyper focused on nutrition, exercise, so I can use all of those nutrients to build muscle. And on top of that, I also was like really focused on sleep, going to bed early, taking magnesium glycinate, vitamin C because I was taking collagen peptide, turmeric, vitamin D3 plus K2, which is for bone. And one of the biggest challenges was the decision to quit using nicotine after 15 years. Nicotine is bad, particularly when you're recovering from some sort of extreme bone fractures. I just quit cold turkey. Now I just chew on straws. So I was doing really, really well. Not just with like the physical side of things, building my body to be as strong as it's ever been, but mentally, I was very focused. Emotionally, I felt confident. But there I was in England in April, in the beautiful British countryside, and I just started to feel like something was horribly wrong with my arm. I was experiencing like a very severe, sharp, stabbing pain inside my arm. Movements with my wrist would send electricity like through my forearm, and it was brutal. And the onset of this happened rather quickly to the point where my host, Tom, could sense that I was like tuning out, and I was. Fortunately, though, I had filmed everything that I had needed to film, so finally it was a day for me to fly home, and Tom dropped me off at Heathrow Airport there in London. And as I was boarding the flight, I've got my carry-on. I could not get my carry-on up into the overhead compartment. And I was struggling. And all of a sudden, the line of people behind you waiting to get to their seats, I was just in my head like, gosh, damn it. This like 70-year-old woman behind me was like, let me give you a hand. I couldn't swallow my pride. How pathetic. This 34-year-old, once tough soldier is having an old lady help me put my bag in the overhead compartment. It seems like it should be the other way around. So I spent the next 10 hours flying across the Atlantic, just in my head, like thinking, I can't do this. When I got home, I sent a message over to my surgeon and asked if I could get an x-ray. I went to go and get the imaging done, and immediately there it was in black and white, literally. Broken plates, a broken screw that ran from one side of my arm to the other was just perfectly split. Even my surgeon was beginning to scratch his head a little bit, and we're talking one of the world's best elbow surgeons. So I was in the right place. We knew right away that this was going to turn into a very big surgery that would require removing all of the broken hardware, all of it. And then because my bones still had not fused, it would require more hardware to then be put back in. Instead of the screws going horizontally, sending a screw vertically up into the humerus, and just trying different things. He didn't want to jump to doing a surgery right away. He wanted it to instead be able to compare where my arm is in that moment to 1 month down the road, and then compare the two, but really focus on the bone itself to see if my bones were starting to fuse back together, or worst case scenario, it's a non-union.
A non-union is when a broken bone refuses to heal the way that it should. Normally, after a fracture, your body gets right to work forming new bone to bridge the gap and fuse everything together. But with a non-union, the healing process stalls out. Sometimes the body even goes in the wrong direction, breaking down bone at the fracture site through a process called resorption. That makes the gap even bigger and the bone even weaker. And in my case, my humerus isn't just broken in two, it's in multiple pieces. And without surgery to stabilize it and restart the healing process, it's not going to fix itself.
So the surgeon wanted to do a 1 month comparison from the moment that I was with him, and then 1 month later, do another image, a CAT scan, to see if there was any progress with the bone, see if it's fusing together. Between the two imaging, we had 1 month to kind of just kick back, but we as a family went to Vermont to my parents' lake house and had a really good time. And from a therapeutic standpoint, it worked wonders as far as just allowing me to kind of recompose myself a little bit. It was just a time to take in the beauty around me. As the date came closer to returning to my surgeon, the anxiety started to pick up again, and rightfully so. When the image came back, he said, it's not good. It's a non-union. I remember feeling just like a pit in my stomach, maybe even a little bit like wanting to cry. I still have anxiety of the moment when I had crashed, when one of the surgeons came out and said, I don't think we're going to be able to save your arm. In that moment, I was like, okay with it. I was like, let's just do it. They've got new prosthetic arms and I'll be okay. So the surgeon, I should be saying Dr. Dutta. You guys probably know him from the previous videos at this point. Dr. Dutta said, this time we're going to put in stainless steel. My arm had only known titanium since the crash. It's ultimately much stronger and it can hold your bones in place long enough that if they were going to reconnect, if they were going to fuse, using stainless steel would be the best option for this situation. But not only that, he was also going to graft bone from my ulna and then turn it into kind of like a rough powder and then insert it into the gap between the bones. In addition to that, he was going to use something called bone growth factor.
Put bone growth factors in the fracture site. The latest technology, literally a space age material. It's called Cerament G.
Okay.
And we put Infuse, which is bone morphogenic protein 2. So we put both of those agents into the fracture site to stimulate healing. We did everything you can. Full court press.
Well, thank you so much.
Fortunately, the surgery went well. There were no complications. So after a few days in the hospital, Leandra and I headed back home. And I basically just had a wound vac. There's a tube that comes out that sucks the blood that is expected to drain from the wound. But there wasn't any blood actually being released from my wound. That's kind of like the expectation. And this was a little bit concerning, but when I got home, things weren't going so well. I was running a really high fever of like 102 degrees. At night, I was pouring sweat. I was literally soaking the bed, and Leandra and I snuggle like every night. One night, she like got off of me and her hair was soaked. Like, this is probably really disgusting stuff. Most of all, my arm was beginning to swell like crazy. Like, my hand was blowing up like a balloon.
Hand is super painful.
And I couldn't really see what was going on underneath the dressing because it was blocking what I could see. So I reached out to Dr. Dutta and I sent him some photos of everything and explained what was going on. And he became, quite concerned as well. And he instructed Leandra to then cut off the dressing. And he said, I want you to take some photos of it and send it to me. So I get the dressing off and my arm looked horrible. It was big, unusually large, and painful. Dr. Dutta said, you need to go to the emergency room. Not just any emergency room. I want you to go to University Medical Center's emergency room and tell the person there that you need to see Dr. Cromack. Dr. Cromack is a surgeon who specializes in hand surgeries. And the two of them, had worked together very closely over the years. And then he could communicate with Dr. Dutta everything that he believed was going on, and it would just logistically be easier. But when I got to the hospital, my arm was looking so unusual that I got swarmed by different doctors and surgeons and nurses because they believed that there was this emergency situation going on called compartment syndrome. The arm has expanded so much to the limitations of the skin's stretchability internally. Everything is being squeezed or crushed so tight that you're at risk of severe nerve damage, paralysis. And so it's an emergency situation. And that's why I was getting swarmed. I distinctly remember one of the nurses coming in and me asking her, like, hey, what's going on? She made a comment about, like, they're going to have to amputate, right? Leandra's sitting over there. But yeah, it appeared as though that the bone was infected. She was saying, like, in situations like this, they might have to amputate my arm. That is such a heavy thing to hear. I actually broke down. Like Leandra and I cried together. It's incredible having such a wonderful partner in life who reassures you that two arms or one arm, it makes no difference, that she'll be there to love me and stay by my side. And to me, that meant a lot. And it gave me strength when I didn't have strength. They admitted me into the hospital and I spent 5 days there, but it wasn't an infection. As it turns out, the paste that they had injected into the space between my bones, that bone growth factor, was not received well by my body. And that's what they believe to this day caused such massive inflammation in my arm. And over those 5 days, my swelling started to come down. And right there at the very end, my arm actually was rapidly releasing the blood to the point where it filled the entire container of this wound vac system. By the time the blood had stopped flowing out of my arm still had this crazy look to it. So on Monday evening, I sent the photos of this hematoma in my arm over to Dr. Dutta, and he was very concerned. He asked me, can you get here Wednesday morning so I can perform a surgery called a hematoma evacuation, where they'll open the arm up and literally scoop out coagulated blood? And I said, yeah, I will get there. But I didn't have a plan. I didn't know how I was going to get there. But as I went to bed on that Monday evening, I was woken up by my mom, who was in town, just because of all of the complications with my arm. She was massively beneficial being here to help out with the kids. But she woke us up in the middle of the night because as she'd gotten out of bed to use the restroom, she was ankle deep in water. When it rains, it pours. There was a pipe broken underground and it was flooding several of the rooms in the home. So there I am, just out of surgery, outside in the rain, trying to cut off the main water line. I was just a hot mess, but fortunately, we have this general contractor guy that we always work with, came out and fixed that. So that following morning, we contacted the VA's travel office. And so I told the guy, I was like, I need to get to San Antonio today because I have a surgery first thing in the morning before the sun even rises. And he said, I don't think we can do that. How are we going to get you and your wife on a flight? And I said, I've already got one. It's a Southwest flight that leaves in an hour. And I said, can you book us that flight? And he said, you think you can make it? And I said, we've already got our bags packed. So he booked the flight. We raced off to the airport and we actually got to San Antonio in a very seamless fashion. It worked out really well. So, we got to the hotel, went to bed, and that following morning, Dr. Dutta had performed the surgery and informed us that
Didn't see any infection, but tons of blood. I think it might have gotten infected. We had to wash it out. Like, 'cause all that blood is going to capture bacteria. I got all that out of there. This just needed to be done. This is a no-brainer. It's like a Michelin Man that he popped,
I know. What causes that retention?
I think he reacted. It was a huge surgery, and it just blew up. So it just needed to be controlled. We're going to keep him in overnight. Tomorrow morning, first thing, you should be able to get out of here.
Well, thanks, Dr. Dutta.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you so much.
one of the things that Dr. Dutta had to do in the main surgery was to relocate the ulnar nerve. It was giving me a lot of complications at the time when I started to realize that something was really wrong with my arm. I couldn't even wash my hands. And now, I can move, my wrists in a way that is pain-free, but when manipulating a nerve, there may be, pros and cons to everything. One of the complications is I can't extend my fingers. I've got such a reduced sense of feeling in my pinky. It's kind of just there, as well as my ring finger. There's just weakness in this hand in general, but I feel confident that with time I'll regain hopefully all of the strength in my right hand. When I had first met Dr. Dutta and he had performed that first surgery, manipulating my elbow, engaging in things can increase blood flow, and that pressure on the bone itself increases bone strength. When people get older, they should go for walks because the stress on the bone can increase the bone density and actually make them stronger. It's kind of like the same thing in my situation. However, this time around, we're taking it easier. And I know that many of you have actually commented, hey, do you think it might be too much too soon? I don't know. My bones just were not healing. So that brings me to today. I am waiting for this immediate post-surgical pain to subside. I haven't thought much at all about flying again. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to be flying again. I do not fear flying. In spite of the traumatic crash that I had, I don't worry about paramotoring. It does not seem to me like it's something intimidating or scary. I don't want to spoil much, but while I was in both Italy and England, I did go back up into the air and I loved it. Oh my goodness, what a beautiful experience in a beautiful place. I am still a big advocate for powered paragliding. But before I wrap up this video, I want to quickly mention a comment that really stood out to me from a previous video. And the comment said that I was willing to die for this hobby, and then asked if I'm willing to live for my family. And it's that's a pretty interesting comment. There's a lot to unpack. And I thought to myself, there are instances where a comment might actually best be addressed, not just as a reply to that comment, but in a dedicated video. So from now on, if I see a comment that deserves a deeper and more thoughtful reply, I'll create a short for it. If you'd like to hear my full response to that comment, you can go check it out now. So thank you for watching. And thanks for sticking around for this mess of a year. So if you've got something to say, please leave it down below in the comments. You never know, it might just turn into my next YouTube short. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.